dear friends. I'd like to begin by saying thank you to the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, without whom we wouldn't be here today. And I'd also like to say thank you and congratulations to Lena and to Yuri, who, as Lena has just said, have been working for the last 20, we'll say 25, it's easier as a round number, for the promotion of the values to which we've already been referring this morning. I'll also say belatedly happy birthday to Lena, although ladies don't like being told they've had their birthday, but it was very recent. And as Lena said, I represent the Association of Schools of Political Studies, which was set up to support a project which was launched within the Council of Europe. And I always feel when I come here that I'm coming home because I witnessed the first meeting of two people in a flat in Moscow, namely Lena and Catherine Lalumièrre. That meeting of two people became a meeting of minds, and then it became a meeting of friends, and it's as a result of that sort of osmosis that the Schools of Political Studies project came into being, and the first school to ever be set up was the school in Moscow. Just one other word of my own, because I'm not actually supposed to be speaking today, and then I'll read this, but I just wanted to take up the reference to the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. Sadly, today, the schools of political studies and all the efforts which are making it even more necessary today than they were 30 years ago. But I do remember that on that day of the 8th or 9th of November, I was in Oslo with Catherine Lalumière, and the first thing which she said was, there will have to be a change in people's mentalities. And that is the work that we're doing now and that you're doing in your respective ways. And I think the schools are important because they create groups of people who are able to permeate the rather closed societies very often in which they are. And I think that's one of the great achievements which has been made by this project. So now, if you will allow me to, I will read you the message that Catherine Lalumière sent. She says, "This year I'm unable to be with you in Berlin, which I much regret, and all the more so because we are living in very troubled times and facing a whole host of new problems requiring solutions. Yet again, people worldwide expect Europeans to come up with valid solutions, not just for themselves, but for the rest of the planet as well. We are still pursuing that search for lost universalism. In other continents, there are often complaints about Europeans being patronizing and considering themselves as superior. Quite rightly, colonialism is resented. But in fact, scientific and technological progress, deeply held humanistic philosophical values, and so on, have to a large extent originated in Europe, or perhaps more accurately, have been distilled and shaped in Europe. However, even those who criticize European arrogance expect Europe to find solutions to the unresolved problems facing our planet. Europe's long history, with its centuries of experience across the world, continues to place great responsibility on its shoulders. The burden is all the heavier and difficult to bear since in today's world, Europe's weight is constantly diminishing in terms of demography, size, and natural resources. Today, there are two sorts of unresolved problems. On the one hand, those which are well known, but which have not yet been resolved satisfactorily, and on the other, those which are new, or to be more precise, problems of which we have only recently become aware. In the first group, I will highlight an example which is the source of considerable confusion and relative failure, namely democracy. Democracy is a wonderful concept. what could be better than government of the people, for the people, and by the people? It is indeed a fine example of respect for an individual's rights. Europe is proud to be a continent which has officially adopted democratic systems of government. This is clearly stated by the Council of Europe and the European Union, the two major bodies Europe has established. However, in practice, things are not so grand. Populism, stemming from ignorance and disinformation, is skewing democracy. The notion of illiberal democracy, so dear to a currently much talked about Prime Minister, is a travesty. In other words, simply put, achieving democratic systems of government is still work in progress. And Europe, which is far from perfect, still has a pioneering role to play as regards the rest of the world if the objective remains basing society on humanist values and freedoms. But we must also acknowledge that today there are new problems of which we were not really conscious in the past. This is the case, for instance, with environmental issues, nature conservation, and climate change. Here again, Europe is expected to show the way. It has begun doing so somewhat haphazardly. But it's even worse in other parts of the world, including the USA, whose current president seems utterly indifferent to these questions. Today, in addition to the very serious problems such as ecology to which I have just alluded, we clearly need a far-reaching intellectual and political revolution in which Europe will obviously have a role to play. Over the years, 19th and 20th century society has given an excessive place to materialistic, economic, financial, and monetary considerations. Everything revolves around production, distribution, and consumption. In other words, existence is all about money. This is true whether you are to the left or the right, whether a capitalist or a Marxist. What differs is essentially a more or less egalitarian distribution of wealth. This means that modern society, which we have known, was and still is based on very materialistic values. Today, people are beginning to realize that however important material considerations may be, they are insufficient to satisfy humankind. People are looking for something else, such as spiritual values, which can give meaning to their lives, and it goes without saying, obviously, that those values may be either religious or of totally secular philosophic inspiration. If Europe does have a role to play in the world today, it is perhaps in reviving old values or in advocating new ones. It is patently obvious that young people in our countries are looking for something other than die-hard materialism, even if they, of course, obviously need food in order to be able to nourish themselves. I know that your Berlin meetings have, and that this Fifth International Forum will allow you to think outside the box and challenge the assumptions of the 20th century. We are now in the realm of philosophy, but the cornerstone of European civilization is philosophical. This reminds me of a Bulgarian politician who was jailed for several years under the Zhivkov regime. One day he told me, "If I survived for so many years in prison, if I did not turn into a vegetable, it was because I was able to read Europe's great philosophers. It was they who saved me." That was a message from Catherine Lalumièrre. Thank you.